There's a few reasons why your team could be weak, and this video will address 3 most important factors when it comes to having a good team for endgame content like the Spiral Abyss. While at first it may seem like a good idea to level your whole team equally, the amount of resources required to have each character maxed out can become costly very quickly. And if you've been following this channel, then you know that it's best to focus on 2 characters to be your main damage dealers, especially if you're going to be doing the Spiral Abyss. And it's already challenging enough to have 2 characters who are at their max potential, but trying to apply the same logic to the rest of your team, especially once ascending your characters past level 70 becomes very expensive. Trying to have everyone on the same power level is a time-consuming accomplishment, and it's far more better to divide your resources into more rational portions. Basically, if your team consists of 1 damage dealer and the other 3 teammates are there to provide healing, crowd control, elemental reaction damage, and bursts, then you don't really need to level them up too much. For example, Diona is excellent at providing consistent shield, and her burst can debuff enemies with cryo, as well as heal anyone who stands in the circle. Now, if you're building a team with her, she is most likely going to end up as your support character who will provide the previously mentioned benefits. So the first logical thing you could do with her is to only unlock her ascension to level 70 so that you can gain access to her last passive talent. And while character levels matter in quite a few things, like dealing more damage to your enemies based on level comparison or having bigger elemental reaction damage, it's still a less efficient upgrade than to put the same resources into growing your main damage dealer instead. The next thing to consider would be her talents. Obtaining books from domains is quite an expensive investment, so it's best to decide which talents you consider to be most crucial in order to make the character usable. For example, Diona's basic attack and burst are both at level 1, and only her shield is raised to the maximum level that's limited by her current ascension. And that's because each character excels at something, and Diona's shield is definitely one of those things. She won't be using basic attacks unless it's a charge shot to apply cryo to enemies, and the same goes to her burst. While it has excellent healing, it's more important to have that cryo effect applied on enemies consistently, which doesn't become better after each upgrade, so the burst and basic attacks are focused on providing utility first and damage second. So to sum it up, only ascend your support characters past their second passive talent so that you can save those resources for your main damage dealer instead. And when you're deciding on which talents to level, if it doesn't provide drastic improvements, then it's better to focus only on 1 talent first and then work on the second one if it brings a lot of value. At the end of the day, you're trying to save your precious resin and time so that you can level up your first damage dealer and then move on to the second one so that you can have 2 strong teams in the Spiral Abyss. The lack of support you provide to your main damage dealer could be another reason why you might be missing out on a good chunk of damage, especially if you're in the middle of building your team. More specifically, you could be missing out on some major artifacts and weapons that can greatly boost not only your main damage dealer, but also the rest of your team. And the 2 biggest artifact sets that come to mind are of course the Verdes and Venerir and Archaic Petra sets. This comes off as no surprise that both of these sets are designed for the neutral, anemo, and geo elements. You'd be amazed just how much of a drastic improvement both of these artifact sets provide for such a low investment. For example, obtaining the 4-piece set of any of these artifacts, no matter what stats they have, and putting it onto one of your Anemo or Geo characters will make your fights in Spiral Abyss much more easier. Now of course, if you do decide to hunt for a more powerful version of the artifacts by getting the best main stat and substats will also give a big improvement, but the main idea here is to actually utilize these sets for the amazing bonuses they bring for your team, instead of solely focusing on how the stats will affect the support characters themselves. And the same could be said about the other artifact sets like the Exiles, or Scholars, or the Noblesse Oblige that boosts everyone's attack instead. Basically, just by getting these sets without optimizing the stats they bring individually will increase your main damage dealer's overall performance, which is actually the most important thing to aim for when trying to make your team stronger for the endgame content. One more often overlooked aspect of equipment are the weapons. If you're someone who has a Catalyst user in your team and have access to the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, you could be missing out on a pretty massive damage boost unless your Catalyst is the main damage dealer. This is an extremely lucrative weapon that gives really good boost for free-to-play players. Finally, if you have support characters whose bursts are not there to deal damage but provide utility, like for example Diona, then equipping weapons that have energy recharge in your substat will give a better boost to your overall team's performance, since your bursts will activate more often and provide more consistent support. The same could also be said about weapons which have elemental mastery as their substat, and there's a reason why the stringless bow is such an amazing weapon for anyone who uses elemental reactions as their main strategy of supporting. Overall, when you're lost on what you should be focusing on, especially once you're past adventure rank 40 or 45, start by first acquiring at least few artifact sets no matter what stats they have so that you can start to funnel those bonuses into your main damage dealer. And when it comes to weapons, most support characters can benefit from energy recharge weapons, and some weapons can even give insane damage boosts without even investing into them. Genshin Impact, without a doubt, largely revolves around its elemental system. You see these 7 elements on your loading screen, you interact with them doing puzzles, and even the whole story explores the regions of the world that each focus on one element. So the last big reason why your team could be weak would be the lack of focus on each of these elements, especially if you take the Spiral Abyss into consideration. When you're first starting out, it's natural that it will take some time before you get used to new characters you acquire and deciding which ones you want to stick with. But by the time you're reaching endgame, which is around rank 45, you will start noticing that some of the domains can be easily done with one element or the other, or how some of the enemy shields can only be broken with a certain element. You could of course mitigate some of these challenges like the enemy elemental shields by just using characters as low as level 1 to simply break the shields, but there will be a time when the elemental advantage becomes less about utility and more about damage. And this becomes extremely clear once you start doing the Spiral Abyss. Part of why a lot of veteran players in the community consider Pyro Element to be top tier comes down to the fact that Abyss floors 9 and 12 give huge boosts to Pyro damage, and even the enemies have weaker resistances for this particular element. And this has been going on for nearly 2 months now since the game has launched. At some point, MiHoYo might mix things up a little and change the floors, and suddenly a different element becomes more powerful, but as of making this video, Pyro is still considered to be one of the best elements to complete the Spiral Abyss. So where does that leave the player, especially someone who is free to play or a light spender in the game? Well, for starters, you could first focus on building 2 main damage dealers that are both from different elements. Of course, if you have someone like Razor who primarily focuses on dealing basic attacks which have no elemental association, then it might be even better, but having at least one character that specifically focuses on delivering consistent elemental damage is going to give you a big advantage in Spiral Abyss. Another good approach would be to grow a support character from each element. Following the last 2 tips, you don't necessarily need to dump all your resources into them, but instead have them in your team as support, and once you have enough resources, start getting stronger artifacts on them and then fully maximize their potential on those Abyss floors that have beneficial leyline disorders. Also, keep in mind that when future characters come out, always consider if you already have someone from the same element, and if you're ready to spend resources to grow someone from the same element, or instead you could put those resources into fleshing out the remaining elements you still haven't fully grown. Even though Genshin Impact for the most part is a very laid-back game, the biggest consideration for each player who wants to pursue endgame content like the Spiral Abyss will come down to your resource management. So to summarize, besides investing everything you have into your main damage dealer, always consider what advantages your support characters will bring and spend your resources responsibly. And this would include only ascending them to unlock their second passive talent and leveling talents that actually matter. Later on, when you have enough resources, you can finish upgrading your support characters to their fullest potential, but that comes before you have your main damage dealer fully decked out. And when it comes to artifacts, sometimes just getting their bonuses can give a huge boost to your teammates and the main damage dealer, as well as finding weapons that can give further bonuses or at least improve the frequency of elemental bursts. Finally, this is a game of elements, so make sure to invest into at least one character of each element so that you can utilize their elemental advantages in places like the Spiral Abyss. Enjoy the video, make sure to subscribe to us by hitting the bell notification on and gently pressing the like button. You can also get more useful Genshin Impact news and guides by following us on Twitter. Thank you for watching us.